Okay, Richmond, somebody let me know once y'all are seeing me again. So for those of you itching to get back into coding and actually do some hands-on work, that's where we're going right now. I'm going to do some very quick review of Git, because that last example, I didn't paste in Slack anymore. What's the real way to share code if you're a developer? Git. You know how to do it. Let's use it. I'm going to review how to do that, just because that was the first day and you probably had a lot in your mind. I know I did. So let's go and start from nothing. How do we do Git? You all have this already because we walked it through on the first day. So you already have this course content thing here somewhere. It's not going to be in the same place, probably. Yeah, probably won't as mine. But no matter where you are, go to that directory. You might have it under C Projects, Empower, C Projects, Course Content, wherever it is. Go to it in Windows Explorer. Click on it once. Right-click on it. Git bash here. And at that point, we are in a git bash. So this is a command window that speaks Linux type syntax that we can use to talk with Git. So does anybody remember the command to say, I'm in this repository? How does it know, by the way? Remember that day on day one where we said, show me all the folders, even the hidden ones? Look up here. Git is not magic either. We're looking behind the scenes of everything here. That's a hidden folder. You can't really tell, but it's kind of slightly grayed out. Normally, normal users are not allowed to see that. We told Windows Explorer, show us everything. So if we look in there, that is how Git does its magic. It just files. That's why it works on Windows and on Linux. It stores, that's its own little database. It just files. And if we want to see what's the current configuration, you can open that up. You can see what's going on. No magic. So there's no reason to do that. I'm just showing you that, if you want to, it's all there. So why is that important? I told you to go to course content and open a git bash window, which is where we are. How does it know that it's a Git repository? It knows from where you open the window. So if I go up a level and I do git pull origin master, what's going to happen? Nothing. It's going to complain. It's like, I don't know what you're talking about. Fatal. It sounds pretty serious. Not a Git repository. How did it know it's not a Git repository? Because there's no little special hidden folder. That's how it knows. So that's why we got to go on to, let's go, how do you go down in path statement? We want to go down. Dot dot would go up. Course content. And if I'm lazy and I don't want to type it all and it happens to be unique, you can start typing and press tab and it'll do it for you. And press enter. There I am. And how do I know where I am? Well, in this bash window, it actually tells me where I am. So I know I'm in the right place. Now if I do that same thing, how do you look at your previous commands in the command window? Up arrow. Look at that. Up and down arrow. So I'm going to go up twice. I'm going to go to git pull origin master. This time it's going to know what I'm talking about. Why? Because I have this special little hidden Git folder. It says, oh, I know what I am. When did that get put there, by the way? When we did a clone. Yeah, when we did git clone that repository, it said, oh, let me set this directory up. That's how it did it. So I don't have anything, but if you do that right now, go ahead and pull. You're going to have, if you haven't pulled in the last 5 minutes, something new. And that's going to be the code from the previous session is going to be under day_05 in class, and right there, you're going to have that. So that's a little snapshot of code of the full example from what we just finished looking at with the object. And for the next one or two, I'll put it in there too. But what we're going to do, here's the plan. I always like to keep Keep eyes on the big picture. That's not good news. Go ahead.
So the other commands that we've learned in Git involve, or in Git Bash, but involves with Git, we have pull, commit, and push.
Let's do it. He's asking about what are the other important commands in Git, because we haven't really talked about it since the first day or two. Let's walk through it. I'm going to make a change to that one file that I just posted. I've got it open over here, page 2. And this is, right now, if you all have just pushed, you're going to not see this comment because I haven't written it yet. So, by the way, HTML comment inside of the script, JavaScript comment. Or you forget you've learned 3 languages already, and it's been now 5 days. So we've got, I saved that, Control S. Now I'm going to go back over here. I left this open, and I'm in the right place. But it doesn't know about my changes yet. Git doesn't know about my changes. How do I tell Git, go look for anything that I've changed? Dot. It's like from here down. Go look at it, figure out what's out there. If I want to look, I don't have to do this, but I could say git status. And what's it going to tell me? It's going to tell me, oh, you changed this file. But I'm sticking to, this is the normal developer workflow. You make changes, like we just did. You add it. Then I'm going to, what's the next thing? Just like that? Yep. And then double quote. Why are we using double quote? For the same reason we use double quotes in code. Because we're going to write a string, and it's going to have spaces in it. We need to tell it the start and the end of the string. So, okay. As usual, the pattern is open, close. I've got an opening double quote, ending double quote. Press enter. Okay? And I'm going to, so what have I done at this point?
You staged it to make the change.
The answer was, I've staged that commit locally. So I've named that bundle of changes that. This is a test comment for a git commit. So if I say git log, right there it is. This will list all of the commits. As a matter of fact, we haven't talked about this. Harper may have, because he did more Git up in Richmond when we weren't on the stream. Each one of these crazy numbers is like an identifier for that commit. You ever wonder how you can roll back and go to a previous point in time? I can go back to any one of these commits, undo, and then if I want, I can roll forward back to present. That's useful if you know that a problem started happening 2 weeks ago, and you want to see what were the changes right before we started having problems. Go back there and look at the commits. What did people do? You can't really trust their messages, but you can look at what they changed. So to get out of this window, Q. Q will put us back. If you actually followed my lead there, Q will get you back. Otherwise, you're going to be kind of stuck. So right now, all I did there is to show you Git knows what's happened, and it has all your comments in it, in case there was any doubt. I'm going to do a clear, just so we get back to the top of the window. So at this point, what are the last few commands? I've done a commit. I've done an add. Now, what's the next thing? I've got it committed locally. I've tagged it. My little local Git database knows about it. What do I do next? Push. Push where? Yep.
What does the add do? Git add dot.
That says take a look at any new, changed, or deleted files that I've made in my repository in this directory structure, and recognize them as changes that should be tracked.
Gotcha. So it goes through and just recognizes changes.
That's all.
Do you need to do that before you commit something?
Yes, because commit will only act on the things that you've added to be examined.
Gotcha.
It just depends, that's all. It depends or adds to what's already been.
The question was, does it just depend? It's a little bit confusing because when you say add dot, you're actually saying add uncommitted changes, add unrecognized changes. And Harper would actually say this better than I do. So if you've deleted a file and you do git add dot, that's how you kind of tell it about the delete. If you don't do that, it's not going to delete the file because it's not going to recognize that as a change. So add is a little bit misleading. Don't read into that. When you say add, you're really adding, recognizing my changes. So why did I do this? Because I'm going to try to share the code that we're doing. We have a new little Slack channel called Code, and Mudit has shared a little snippet. Somebody here, Kirsty, has recommended in Winston-Salem that, you know, if you keep pasting code into the normal Slack channel, it kind of clutters things and you can't see what people are actually typing. And that's a very good insight. So let's just create another channel, and let's use this to share snippets amongst each other or with the whole group. So if we're going to share code, we'll paste it here. But the right way is with Git, and the reason I went over this is because I just made the changes. All of the stuff that I'm doing, it's right out there for you in Git. Just pull it down. Now, let's get back to some code, and I know you're all itching to get back into it. So let's start fresh. I'm going to, once again, I'm going to share this with you. We're going to put it in Git so you don't have to worry about typing it. I'm going to create a page 3. And inside of this page 3, I'm going to clear everything out, just so I don't have to type this stuff again. I'm going to leave my script tag. I'm going to have a little title. So that's all I'm going to do right here. And I'm going to save it as page 3.
Is there not like a template that just kind of gives you all that in Sublime?
The question was, does Sublime have a template for the basic HTML structure? And the answer is, I'm sure it does. I don't know it. I'm sure there's a way to use, like, give me a new HTML page. These editors are actually very powerful, to Chris's point. You can set up, if you do the same thing almost every day, and it's just creating a new file, and you want to have all that so you don't have to type it or copy and paste it, these editors are very smart, and you can say, I want to start from that, kind of like a Word document template, DOT, same type of thing, except with code. So yes, I don't know how to do it myself, but yes. So we've got the basic structure of the page, and what do we need to cover? There's only one more thing I'm going to cover, and then I'm going to release you to go and do a challenge for the remainder of the day. And I think Harper wants to have a little discussion with the guys in Richmond. We're going to talk about stuff here in Winston-Salem. We're going to do the same thing. We just want to do it more local. So we're going to get back into jQuery. But before we do that, you need to make sure that you understand one more basic concept. You've seen a for loop, and you've seen arrays maybe once or twice now. You need to understand how those work. Just like objects, those are core concepts that you're going to see in all the other languages. So let's do a very simple for loop. And let's do a for loop that's going to append a number to a span in the page. That's all we want to do. So in order to have it, in order to append a number to a span, we have to have a span, right? How do you write a span? Span. And that would work because we only have one span on the whole page, but to make it more identifiable, pretending like we had a real page, what would you do so you can talk about it easily? Give it an ID. S1. Okay? So we're going to define a variable, we're going to loop through a for loop, and for each iteration of the for loop, every time we go through the for loop, iteration is just a complex word that means every time you go through it. We're going to append the number of that loop, iteration, to the span as text. The whole point here is that you understand with solidity and confidence what a for loop is in an array. So first we're going to do it just with a normal for loop. So what's the syntax of a for loop?
For parentheses, starter point,
It's the starting initialization, but how do we say that?
I equals 0.
Yep. Semicolon, because you actually have 3 statements in the top of the for loop. That's why you have a semicolon, because they're really 3 different things. For initialization, what's the second bit? It's when do you quit? So how many numbers do you want to count? 5. Okay. So we're going to continue until it hits 5. And every time we go through the loop, we need to change the loop iterator, change the number in I. How do we do that? I++. That means add 1 to I. So this little bit is going to be run every time we start the loop again. And then it's going to compare, am I less than or greater than 5? If we got this back, let's do that in a minute. Let's finish the syntax. So just like an if statement, you start and end it. How do you do it for a for loop? Same way. How do you do it? Curly braces. And my editor created an ending curly brace. So nothing scary. That is the complete body of a for loop. If we ran this right now, it's a good question because this relates to jQuery. I'm going to save this right now. And if I do this, console log, just that. I'm going to save that. Is that going to run?
No. You don't have variable yet.
It's a tough one. The answer is I don't know. And the reason I don't know is because it's in the top of the page. If we put it at the bottom of the page, I know it's going to run. Let's find out. But the reason I don't know if it's going to run is because when it runs, I'm not sure if it even has a page yet. Because remember, it's top down. We're not inside of a function, so I know it's going to run. I just don't know if it's going to run successfully. If we put that in a function, I know it's not going to run because functions never run unless you call them. But this is just plain code right there in the script tag. So it's going to try to run. If we have this object called console initialized properly and it's ready, it'll run. Let's see if it'll work. So I'm going to save it. This is called page 3. Okay? And since it wrote to the console, we're not going to be able to tell if it ran unless we look at the console. How do you get to the console? F12. Looks like it did run. Okay, so we're good. I'm going to switch back over. Okay, this is the code we just executed. So we're almost there. Question?
Can you explain why you just wrote that code for the console to read only?
Okay, the question is, why did I do this? Why did I do the console.log? What was my point? Oftentimes, and this is one of those commonplace things in developers, I forget all about having to explain why I'm doing things. Back when I was learning natural database, it's a nasty mainframe language. Sorry, Kathy. Not sure tied to the language, but that's what she was the mentor for me on. It didn't have a debugger. You all are so spoiled by having this little thing where you can actually watch the variables change and everything. So if you don't have a debugger, you're kind of coding blind. But people haven't gotten smarter over the past, they weren't smarter then than they are now. And once again, sorry, Kathy. It's more about how do they do things? How do they get by? The way you do it is, I think in natural the word is a write statement or a display statement. So you have little text that you write to yourself It's a developer debugging their own code. So it's like, I got to step level 11. I got here, I got there. Those are little things that you can run the program, and by looking at the output, looking at what was written, you can figure out where did it go. That's the old school how to debug a program when you had no user interface. This is kind of a carryover. I'm using the console log. Let me switch over here with the mouse. I'm using this to say what happened. It's allowing me to peek inside of what did my code do. Does that answer your question? We haven't actually done anything useful yet. I'm just kind of looking at how does the for loop work. Jamila.
Can you restate the 3 statements of a for loop?
Okay. The question was, what are the 3 statements at the top of a for loop? What is this syntax right here? The first is initialization. That says, where do you start? The second is, where do you stop? And the third one is, every time you go through, how much do you want to change your counter? So if I wanted to jump by 2s instead of 1s, I'm going to save that. I'm going to go back over here, and I'm going to refresh. Look what happened. So there's no magic. It's just 3 different statements, and those 3 statements are initialization, where do you start, where do you stop, and how much do you want to change the iterator by each iteration. So the original goal was we're going to try to append the text into this span. We know how to concatenate. That's all we're doing. So I'm going to comment that out. How do we do that? Somebody help me out. No jQuery here, so this is just straight JavaScript. How do we talk about that span? Document.getElementById. Dot value is equal to I. Is that going to do what we want? It's not going to append, no. No, this is wrong, but why is it wrong? It's the next step, though. Somebody walk us through. Think like that person getting out of bed. Computers are not smart. They just follow instructions. So, first iteration, let's follow it through mentally. Step by step. Var I is equal to 0. It's going to set that variable to 0. It's going to check. What happens if I do this? Let me prove it to you. What is going to happen there? I set the initialization variable at 6, but it says 6 is greater than 5. It's going to initialize, it's going to check that and says, oh, I don't need to do this. It's going to jump over it. It's going to be like an if statement. It's not going to do it even one time. So that's silly code. But just to show you there's nothing special about this. Normally you start at 1 or wherever you want to, and you're counting a certain number of times. So let's follow it through. Starting at 1, it checks to say, oh, am I less than 5? Is 1 less than 5? We're good. That means do the loop. We'll go in here, find this thing. Well, first we look at this. It's just the number 1 at this point. Put that into that span. I think that's the syntax. Is it value or is it HTML? I don't even do old school JavaScript, so we'll have to find it. We'll see if that even works. But let's assume that's the case. Let's assume that's valid syntax. So it's a for loop. We get down here. That's not the end because it's a for loop. It goes back up here, and it's going to say, okay, I'm going to add, in this case, it's going to add 2 because that's the way I left it. So we had 1 before. We're going to add 2 to it. So we're going to have 3. Then we're going to compare. Is 3 less than 5? We're good. Do it again. So we're going to go down here, and we're going to say, what's the number in I right now? What's the value in the box? 3. Put 3 into the span. Wait. What happened to our 1?
Still there.
You replaced it. That's exactly what happened. We had a 1 there, but immediately it came through the second iteration, oh, overwrite that with a 3. We're not done yet. Come down here. Let's go back to the top. We're going to add 2 to it. It's going to be 3 plus 2. It's going to be 5. We check. Is 5 less than 5? No. That's an edge condition. You're not less than 5, though. What do? We jump out. We go here. If there was another line of code there, it would run that line of code. There's no more code. So what are we going to be left with, assuming that this syntax is right, when we run this page? 3. This is a classic trip you up final exam question for computer science people in Computer Science 101. It's like, you have to figure out what this is going to do and tell me the number that it's going to end on. Control S, switch back over. It's not value. So, I've been spoiled by jQuery. What is it? Val? So, the problem here is that I've got a span. I don't have a text box. So, I'm going to...
it's .NO-HTML.
This is why we use jQuery. And it has to be, it's case sensitive probably, it's HTML like that. Thank you. That was Moodit, it helped me out. Okay, I saved that. Let's see if I got the right syntax. I think it's something like inner HTML. I probably have the case wrong. You know what? We're going to go to jQuery anyway. Why fight it? I'm wasting time here.
Case is correct.
Yeah? I don't know. That's why we don't use JavaScript, straight through JavaScript. So I'm going to go over here and I'm going to shamelessly pilfer. So this is the script I downloaded. It has jQuery in it the other day. I'm going to copy it over to my subdirectory over here in day 5 in class. Okay. And I'm going to go over there and I'm going to, how do we import a library? That sounds really important, doesn't it? How do I do that? 1 line of code. That one. I'm going to pause there just for a second. So what this is doing, it says, actually that's not going to work. Let me copy it over here and I'll show you this. Richmond, I'm going to flip back over. I'm going to close this. All I'm doing is I'm copying that 1 line of code. And I'm going to go back over here to the editor. Sorry for the jarring effect there. I'm going to paste it here. There we go. Now, saved it. Now,
Oh, you never patched for S1.
what's that?
S1 does not have patch.
You don't need it. It's so okay. Let's go over and look at the directory in class. This is where we are. I've got a scripts subdirectory. Once again, paths. Remember day 1? You have to understand how to navigate relative paths. Scripts, jQuery. So scripts, jQuery. It's got to match exactly, and it does. So with that 1 line of code, all we're doing is telling the browser, when you load, I've got this other JavaScript file right over here, and I want you to load it into memory and use it. So that runs. Then we can actually use jQuery, all of the functionality of jQuery. And thank you, jQuery, for getting me out of my own incompetence. That is how you actually say the equivalent in jQuery. I'm not going to apologize for deleting that erroneous line of code because I don't want you to learn that. It's wrong. So this is span. What does that mean? ID. It's that little ID right there. And what is the ID? It's S1 HTML. Now, there are 2 flavors. If I didn't pass any parameters, what would I be doing? reading the value. When you pass a parameter, I'm passing this I in here. I'm setting the value. So let's watch and see what happens. We determined earlier, theoretically, that it should end up with a 3, right? We went through the for loop. So I'm going to save this. Let's refresh this. And console. It ends up with nothing. That's crazy. Last page 3. HTML5.
Save it.
Yeah, maybe I didn't save it. But I think something more sinister is going on. Okay, saved it, switch back over here. No? Let's see if this is the same thing. Yeah, right there it is. Okay, well, let's debug my own little 3-line program. Let's go sources, page.
You want to put document dot get ready?
What's that?
You want to put document dot ready?
Ah, I tripped myself up. We were thinking, thank you, Mudit. What's going on is exactly what we started with. When this page runs, it's top down. Is this inside of a function? No, it's not in a function. So what does that mean? As soon as the page loads, the browser is going to see this, and it's going to run that for loop. And it's going to go look at this line of code, and it's going to say, I'm going to go find right now something called S1, an ID of S1. Is it going to find it? No. Why is it not going to find it? Because we haven't got to the body of the page yet. We haven't loaded that yet. That's why we do the document ready. And I'm actually happy because some people weren't. That's why the other one didn't work too? Hence, this is why some developers like to put their JavaScript at the bottom of the page. Because everything else would have been loaded just in case. As a matter of fact, I'm not going to change anything except moving this to the bottom of the page. Right there. Saved it. Refresh. Console. Well, it's actually up here, 3. Worked that time. Thank you, Mudit. Okay, back over here. Everyone understand why we had that problem and how we fixed it? Most people nodding their heads. So we can leave it at the bottom of the page. It doesn't hurt anything, just in case I make another stupid mistake like that.
So it didn't load because it was at the top of the page?
It didn't load because the code was run immediately, and at that point in time, line 8 didn't exist. The browser hadn't seen line 8 yet. So by putting the code at the bottom of the page, it said, okay, I know what that is because I've already seen it, because we're on line 10, 11, and 12. That's why.
And line 8 makes it like physically appear, basically. And so it didn't recognize that there was anything to put anything to.
Yeah, line 8 wasn't even there yet.
Right.
So when it did this, I'm surprised it didn't give us an error. jQuery often gracefully degrades, I think is the technical term for it, where it doesn't necessarily throw an error if you do something that's kind of wacky, because it realizes that usually it's used to augment an application, not break it. So it tries to get out of your way. So jQuery, this is the basic statement of jQuery. Now, if I wanted to get around this, because I really like to put my stuff in the head, I got a question.
Just real quick, can you give us the syntax for the document ready, just so everybody's clear on that?
Yeah, I'm about to do that. I'm not going to leave it at the bottom of the page because I like to have my scripts at the top of the page just by tradition. Nothing wrong with it. I'm going to move it back up here. Let's make it work. Remember that nasty, crazy syntax? Why did I do that so fast for like the 3rd time? It's because I write it every day. It's not because I've memorized it. It's because my fingers know it. I don't even know it. So all I did is, I'm going to pause there. So that says, in order to overcome Ali's incompetence about not understanding the order of page loading, let's help him out a little bit. Let's wait till the page is completely loaded, and then we're going to run this. So remember before where we said functions never run unless you call them? This obeys that rule because we've defined a function right there, and we've given it to jQuery. We're saying, jQuery, when you're ready, and it's called ready, run this function. So it's going to run after we have a span ID S1. So this, even though it's in the head, should work. So I'm going to save it. We're going to go over here, and it works. Thanks again to Mudit. Okay, so now the challenge was we debugged our own code earlier, and we figured out it was going to be 3. That's not really what we started doing about an hour ago. What were we trying to do? We were trying to append all the numbers between 1 and 5. And why is this not working? Stevenson had the answer earlier. Remember what the answer was. Why is this not showing the numbers 1 to 5? It replaces them. We're not concatenating. What we really want to do is concatenate. How do we concatenate here instead of just replacing?
Plus.
So we're going to...
Plus.
Do you want the plus before or after the I? And what do we... Think like that person getting out of bed in the morning. Step 1 is, what are we concatenating? What are the two things we're putting together? The integer, that's the next number. What are we concatenating it to?
The current number.
Whatever it was before. So what was it before?
0, whatever.
S1.
It was whatever is in S1 last time. So how do you say, get me whatever text is in S1? If somebody said value, and that's exactly right if it were an input box. HTML. It's exactly this, except instead of passing in a value, we're going to read the value. So let me do this in 2 steps. So last span value. Okay? Does everyone understand that line of code? That says, go find, remember jQuery, step 1. We use a selector to go find what it is we want to talk about. And we're saying, and we could, remember CSS from this morning? How do we be more specific? Not just an ID of S1, but only a span with an ID of S1. How do we say that? If we did a span dot S1, what would that mean? Class. Yeah, we have an ID, so we leave it as a hash. So that is going to find what we want to talk about. HTML open close means get whatever's in there. Notice how similar it is to this one. The only difference, and this is a little bit confusing about jQuery, that's their pattern though. If you pass something, you're changing it. If you don't pass something, you're getting it. So we're getting it here. And we're taking the value that's in there and put it in there, last span value. Then remember, back to the concatenation. We're going to take whatever we've got there, what used to be in there, and we're going to add a number to it. We want the number on the left or right-hand side. So we got first loop iteration. Let's walk this through again. We got a 1. Is there anything in the span value there? The first iteration. No, it's just going to give us a blank. No problem, we got a blank. So last span value is going to be a variable that has a blank in it. Now, we have a 1 here, and we want to throw a 1 on the end. So last span value plus, you know how to concatenate, it's plus. Plus 1, plus I. In that case, it's going to be 1. 1 is in the box named I. And let me break that I'm used to seeing things like I could do this in one line. I'm going to show it to you as you're going to see it in the wild, but this is not in the wild. We're still in the reservation here. So last spin value, new spin value. So this is way verbose. Developers don't do it like this. Okay? So these are the steps that we're doing. Let me show you the alternative way, and I'm going to put it in comments here because it kind of hurts me to do it in 3 steps. I'm going to do it both ways, just to show you it's exactly the same. Step 1, just to walk you through the way you're going to see it in the wild. You still get the value, whatever it was. You concatenate. You pass that together as a parameter to the HTML, which means replace it. So get what's there, concatenate, call it to replace. So I'm doing it in 3 steps here. Get what's there, concatenate, replace. Now let's see if that works. Save, switch over, refresh. 1, 2, 3, 4. Why is it not including 5?
It's not less than or equal to 5.
Because it escaped when it was 5. It didn't go through the 5th time. The question is what?
Could you do one line of append?
1 line of append.
Like, when you accomplish something in one line of the $sign, s1.html.
Oh,
I mean, append.
yes.
new spin value.
The question is, let me comment this out. Let me show you how oftentimes in the wild you will see this, and that's really what Emma's asking about. So that's one way of writing it. That's perfectly valid. Oftentimes you'll also see it like this, just to prepare your eyes. Okay? In jQuery, oftentimes they just they do more like that, just so it's more readable, but it's the same thing.
Dot append instead of dot HTML.
Oh, instead of
That whole thing.
okay, another way to do it, using append instead of HTML. Yeah, HTML replaces the entire contents. Let's do it a different way. Once again, there are multiple ways to get to success. Let's do it with append. And then we don't even have to do all of this plus equal stuff, right? Let's see if that works. Like that?
Yeah.
Let's try it. And if so, I prefer your way. It does. Why do I prefer her way? Because it's simpler. It's easier to read. Beauty and simplicity. Okay. I've reviewed inadvertently append, and I've reviewed HTML. I've reviewed HTML setting and getting. We've reviewed a for loop. Now, here's a little challenge. And unless there's a request, Harper says, you need to cover this or whatever, we're going to split. We're going to take maybe 5 to 10 minute break, come back, but I want you to go ahead and do this challenge. Use jQuery, and I will commit this to Git in just a minute. You can use this as a starting point. The challenge is use a for loop, very much like this one, to generate a certain number of divs on the page. Each div, remember this morning where we had red circles, blue circles? One of those, whatever you want it to look like. Put the number of the iteration in the div, in the circle, rather than this morning I think it was this is a red circle, this is a blue circle, just the number. So if your iteration number 1, it'll be a 1. 2, 2. I want you to add, append to the page, these divs. 1 iteration per div. Each div should have a random color. Where are you, random color. I don't want to throw you for a loop, This is where we steal code. Let me go over here and let me show you where Mudit shared it with you already. Yeah. So right there, this function, that's how you get a random color. Okay? Copy and paste that. So what I want you to do is you're going to use something very much like this. I'll commit it. Use a for loop as a challenge. If you get there, change that hard-coded 5. Hard-coded is a word. Have y'all, if I use that, hard-coding? Does anybody know what hard-coding means? Hard-coding means I've typed a literal value into the code, and that's usually a bad thing in the real world. Things like, why is that a bad thing? Because if I've hard-coded it, if I've made it always 5, that means it's not a variable. People can't change it without calling up a developer and it's like, oh, I need 10 now. And that's kind of a pain. It's a drag to call a developer all the time to change stuff. So it's better to have a configuration, or it's better to allow them to have a text box, which is what I'm going to ask you to do. Add a text box to your screen that allows the user, you, to specify how many divs do you want. Type in 100, type in 300, type in 2. It's up to you. Use whatever they type in to generate the number of divs. Okay? Use jQuery. So methods you're going to use append. You're going to generate some HTML. Remember, when you append, you can append more than just text. This is just a string, but you can append HTML. Remember how HTML is just a string. So if I wanted to make a div as a string, okay, I could use that and pass it to the append, and the browser's going to understand. Okay. Any questions before we go off? Y'all understand what the challenge is?
You go ahead and add it to Slack just so they can revisit it.
Well, I'm going to put it in Git. So give me 2 minutes after the stream stops, and then go ahead and pull, and this code is going to be in Git, ready for you to pick up and use.
And then